Okay, we're going to go through Sif Gimel and Simon Kuf Peiches. Chniza Sheferes, Veitzio Badam, and Ras Adam Bechaticha, the two dinim that are discussed in this Sif. They're interconnected, and we go through the Alter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek's, and understand the different svaras, the Yesod of the Machlokes between the different shittas on this matter. Shulchan Aruch starts by saying, Chnisa Sheferes, she put in a Sheferes, a hollow tube of some sort, into Eisei Mokim, Veitzio Bodam, and blood came through it. Tehoira, she's tahor. What does it mean? Echnisa sheferes veitzio badam. The Alter Rebbe right away explains to you in Sifkat and Ches. Where did she put the sheferes? All the way echnisa ad hamoker ve'ad bichlal. She did not put it in partially. She put it in all the way till the opening of the moker. And there blood flowed from the moker straight into the sheferes. And from the sheferes, it came out. Yeah, Ichnisa, the Alter Rebbe's Lashon, Ichnisa toch moker domeo, went all the way into the rechem, right by the opening, all the way into the rechem, and the blood went out through it, and she became, and then blood was in the sheferes, and she took it out, the sheferes with the blood, and she is tahir. Why is she tahir? Because Ein derech nashim liros kain. Very important words for this whole seif. It's not the regular way that a woman sees blood. And therefore, the pasuk says, Dam Yoseva b'psara, that the blood has to go through Zoiva b'psara. B'psara, the Gemara learns from it, v'lei b'sheferes, that it has to be, the blood has to go b'psara, not in the sheferes, but maybe it's not derech. It's not derech adam to go out this way. This is the shitta of the Rosh. Now Alter Rebbe continues, the reason of that what does besara refer to is not because of chatzitza, has nothing to do with the fact that the sheferes is mafsik between the besara and the dam, and therefore there's no zoivia b'besara. Rather, when it says b'psara, it refers to that it's not ein derech noshim liros dam. And the pasuk only makes a woman tamei when she sees blood the way that the way the regular woman sees blood. So now comes the question. You're going to put a sheferes all the way into the moker, doch ein psichas ha-moker b'loi dam. So maybe you're not going to have the zoiv yeh b'fsaro, that it's not going to go, because it's not derech anoshim liris, but ultimately you cause a psichas hamoker with this sheferes. So you see, brings to the BCS, is talking about sheferes shel konesh udak, it's a thin sheferes, and therefore it doesn't cause psichas hamoker. But Alter Rebbe adds in parentheses, but if there would be a sheferes which is thicker and it would cause psichas hamoker, then obviously she would become tamei, because you can't have psichas hamoker without seeing blood. So now the question is, ultimately it's not derech hanoshim liros kain to see through the sheferes, which we said before. So what does it make a difference if you have psichas hamoker or you don't have psichas hamoker? The answer is, derech hanoshim is to see by psichas hamoker. The only way that the woman is going to see is the moker opens up. So the fact is that the psichas hamoker is derech noshim liros, and what happens afterwards, we don't look at it. We don't care, and that is already included into zoiv dama bivsara. Yeah, it means it has nothing to do with chatzitza, because otherwise, like we said before, if it will be an issue of chatzitza, then what difference does it make if it's if it's psichas hamoker or not. Ultimately, there's no zoiv b'fsara, but Alter Rebbe brings from the Rosh that it has nothing to do with the chatzitza. It has to do with derech hanoshim liris. In other words, the definition of zoiv dama b'fsara is, the definition according to the Rosh, the way the Alter Rebbe understands it, is that derech hanoshim liros is any form of way which blood is naturally seen by the woman. That means psichas hamoker causes blood to flow out. Blood flows out through the body. So if you have either of the two, you got derech hanoshim liros. So if so, what does the sheferes help us? Go back to the sheferes. If there's no psichas hamoker, you only have a sheferes over there. Sheferes doesn't help you anything. Because if the blood flows naturally into the sheferes, again derech hanoshim liros. Derech hanoshim liros, his blood comes out from the rechem and goes down. So the sheferes, all it did was it directed the blood. Didn't do anything more than that. So what difference does it make if the body directed the blood, the sheferes directed the blood? Ultimately it's back to derech hanoshim liros. So that's what Alter Rebbe explains, that the blood came out of the rechem because of the sheferes. The blood would have stayed in the rechem. There's blood in the rechem, it's not going anywhere. Now you put the sheferes in, and that sheferes drew the blood out of the rechem, and that is what caused the woman to, and that is why it's not ein derech hanoshim liriskein. And the Alter Rebbe concludes that this is what the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch hold. They are basing themselves on the Rosh. In other words, as of now, this is the halacha. This is to point out, there's two tzemach tzedeks in the topic. It's clear that tzemach tzedek disagrees with Alter Rebbe on this matter, on many fronts in this discussion. The tzemach tzedek explains Alter Rebbe in certain points. The tzemach tzedek disagrees with Alter Rebbe. The tzemach tzedek that we learned last week, Siman Kuf Chaf Hey, where we discussed this topic we're going to discuss today. We discussed then in short, and we said we're going to get back to it today. What was the Siman Kuf Chaf Hey discussing about? It was discussing the chumrah of the Bach regarding a woman who sees a Mara Lavan after a bath, if derech adam leislaben, and the whole discussion of tzemach tzedek, which is in two simonim. Do we go basar akira, that when it was nekar, it was red and then it changed color, but obviously if it's white, when it was nekar, it was obviously white because it came 2 hours later, it became white inside, so therefore it's not a problem. Tzemach tzedek goes back and forth about this whole discussion, and the maskana tzemach tzedek says you don't have to be machmer like the Bach. Not only you don't have to be machmer, it might be a better idea to dafka not be machmer according to the Bach. But that is what the tzemach tzedek mainly discusses in Kuf Chaf Hey. In Seif Hey of this Siman Kuf Chaf Hey, the tzemach tzedek brings another raya. He says, I have another raya why this Mara Lavan, you don't have to follow the Chumrah of the Bach. Why is it? Because in the sugi of the Gemara regarding Rei Adam B'Sheferes, which we're learning now, what's the reason why we say that in Sheferes she's tahira? Because the Torah says, Dam Yezeva B'Vsara. And Rashi over there explains, now Rashi was not brought into this equation yet, the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention Rashi's Shita B'Chlal, we'll soon see why. But just remember there's a Shita Rashi regarding this Dam Yezeva B'Vsara. And Rashi explains that it's because of Chatzitza, exactly the opposite of what the Rosh holds. And in Sheferes you have a Hefsek, you have a Chatzitza, and therefore, when you have, if the Tzemach Tzedek says if the blood became white before it went through b'vsara, so you don't have dam yezeh b'vsara, and it's fine, even if it's mamish dam nida. Therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek says, based on that, if there was blood which became white, nislaben, the woman is tahir. That blood, because there was no more of zoiv dam b'vsara. And then the Tzemach Tzedek continues and he brings the shit of the Rambam. Shit of the Rambam also, we didn't see it, it's not like the Rosh. The Rambam writes, the Lashon of the Rambam is that she put the sheferes ichnisa beproizder. Doesn't say you put it all the way up to the rechem. Ichnisa beproizder. Which means that if the blood touched the bayis apnimi, but did not go through the bayis achitzon, the fact that the chatzitze, when the blood traveled through the area which should have been the bayis achitzon, she remains tahira. And that Tzemach Tzedek says, so is mashma also from Rashi, aside from the Rambam, aside from Rashi, that you don't have to put the sheferes all the way into the market. And for sure, obviously, you don't have, when it comes to the slab, and you have nothing to worry about it. It's not b'chal considered blood. But the Tzemach Tzedek concludes that all this doesn't go well according to the shit of the Alter Rebbe. Because the shit of the Alter Rebbe in Sifkat Mches, and also later in Sifkat Mtes, we're going to see it throughout, that in Royal the sheferes has to be all the way up to the rechem. And then is when we say in derech hanoshim liris. Not that it's because of chatzitza, because in derech hanoshim liris. And therefore, based on this, that what the Alter Rebbe brings the name of the Rosh, that you have to have it all the way till the rechem, obviously means that if some of the blood touched the body, and the sheferes wasn't all the way to the rechem, she becomes tummy. So therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek concludes regarding the white that the only way, if Lu Yitzur, we say that the blood becomes white, this is all Lu Yitzur. Tzemach originally started by saying it doesn't hold of the shit of the bach, that blood could become white. So Lu Yitzur, you're going to follow the shit of the bach, that blood could become white. If you want to go down that route, and according to the Alter Rebbe, you would have to say that only if the blood became white before it left the makar at all. It became white before it was neka. Then it's fine. Then she's tired. That's what Tzemach Tzedek writes in Siman Kuf Chafei. That's the first place where the Tzemach Tzedek discusses. I'll say that I don't know the years when the tshuvas are written, but first in the order of the book. Siman Kuf Chafei. This is the first place that Tzemach Tzedek discusses in part what the Alter Rebbe discusses over here. In Siman Kuf Chavches, in the beginning, Tzemach Tzedek also discusses this topic. The Shaila in Siman Kuf Chavches is not so relevant to the discussion we're having now, but right after that, Tzemach Tzedek starts discussing the question. Tzemach Tzedek starts and explains something which is relevant to this Alter Rebbe. And he explains as follows. When the Rosh tells you that Tichnisa sheferes ad hamakar, that you have to put the sheferes, based on the Rosh, you have to put the sheferes all the way till the makar. So Tzemach explains to you, it doesn't mean that the sheferes, well, like we saw in Alter Rebbe, it doesn't mean that the sheferes went in to the makar and then the blood starts flowing naturally. Rather, the blood was sitting in the rechem. Naturally, it wouldn't be flowing. And it never went to the bayis achitzon. You put the sheferes in, and you caused the blood to leave the rechem. And at that point, that blood is considered dam tereh because it never flowed out of the body. Then he says, what does it mean that you have to put it into the rechem? He says, really, it's enough to put it up until the entrance of the rechem. However, it's very hard to get exactly the right spot, that there shouldn't be even tipas dam kechardo, which is going to touch the proizdoir and make the woman tamei. There's a lotion tzemach tzedek efshel tzamtzem, you know that lotion. And that would be, if it's not exactly in the right place, and tipas dam kechadol goes into the proisdoir from the rechem, she would become tamei because zoiv yedam b'vsara, that the blood came out in its natural form, derech hanoshim like this. So therefore, that's why the Rosh said that it has to be ad rechem, and it seems like that's what Alter Rebbe explains into the rechem. Now,
why does the Alter Rebbe or the Suffer really care if it's touching the person?
If it's what?
If the dam touches the person, the whole reason of Shuchat is that that's not there.
Right.
Right. So if it's just pressed up to the it's not actually inside, then it's still right where there.
If what?
Of the re'iyah.
No, because then the derech of re'iyah is that it leaves the rechem and flows through the body. There's a leaving the rechem aspect to the derech re'iyah.
I know. So in this case, if it's not inside, it's just up to, then it left the rechem. Right?
It didn't leave the rechem. The only reason the blood is sitting in there. You put the sheferes to the edge, and that drew the blood out.
If it's just to the edge, it's not going to draw the blood out unless it wants to come out anyway.
Yeah.
And it's there.
So maybe that's what Alter Rebbe says if you go all the way in. Could be. Now, in Ois Beis, the Tzemach Tzedek goes into a discussion why the Alter Rebbe, so to speak, had to twist the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch and everybody to match into the shit of the Rosh. Huh?
There's also the Piska Tshuva that talks about touching the Piska Gimel, not touching the praise their wall, not touching.
That's the cousin.
But Tumah, touching on the same topic.
Yeah, it's also an Alter Rebbe in Madura Basra has the same similar ideas, yeah. Which is also brought in the Tzemach Tzedek. I'm not gonna have enough time to go through it, even though I started early today. But some of it we'll touch upon the topic. The next point that Tzemach Tzedek says, I'm putting the easy Tzemach Tzedek first. The second point that Tzemach Tzedek brings over here is why did the Alter Rebbe want to force the Shulchan Aruch to fit according to the Rosh? Why did he have to put the Shulchan Aruch to fit according to the Rosh? Because really, if you read the Lashon of the Torah, when it comes to the Lashon, technically, the Lashon of the Torah, you could explain in different ways. The Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, you also explain in different ways. The way Alter Rebbe understands it is, in the continuation of Siv Gimel, one of the things that when it discusses the Raya B'Chaticha, the Shulchan Aruch adds, and Torah adds, Dafka Chatichas Ktanis Dumi the Sheferes. Only Chatichas Ktanis, small pieces, Dumi the Sheferes. What does that mean? That if it's Sheferes Gdoilo, should become Tamei. If Sheferes Gdoilo should become Tamei, why would she become Tamei? Because of Psichas HaKever. But Psichas HaKever doesn't make a difference because you have a Hefsek, you have a Chatzitza anyway, so what do we care? And there's no Derech HaNoshim Liris for Chatzitza. And even if she didn't put the Sheferes all the way up to the Rechem, she would put it only up through the Beis HaChitzon, still a Chatzitza, still she should be Torah. And Derech HaNoshim Liris came. And we don't care if it's Psichas HaKever or not. So therefore, because the Shulchan Aruch and the Torah writes Chatichas Ktanis Dumi Sheferes, which means that they're Oyser Sheferes Gdoila. Obviously, the reason they're Oyser Sheferes Gdoila is because they don't follow the idea of a Chatzitza. And Chatzitza is not what's going to make the difference whether a woman is tired or not. Obviously, because if it would be Chatzitza, we don't care how big the Sheferes is. Therefore, must be that the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch both hold, like the Rosh, that Zoiv, well, Torah for sure holds like the Rosh, it has to hold that the idea of Zoiv Yadam B'Vsara is only with regards to that it refers to Ein Derech Noshim Liris, and not to Chatzitza. Therefore, because, like the Alter Rebbe explains, because Ein Derech Noshim Liris, but Psichas HaKever is Derech Noshim Liris, and going through the body, even one drop is Derech HaNoshim Liris. That's why you have to have that it's all the way to the Rechem, and you have to have that it's not Sheferes Gdoila, and that's why the Shulchan Aruch that follows that opinion had to tell you that it's that by Chaticha, only Chatichas Ktanas do Mishaferes and not a Chaticha Gdel. Which means, in other words, that the idea of Zev Yadam V'Sara, when is a woman Tohar because of the limud of Zev Yadam V'Sara, is only if the dam came in a way that's not a regular way. That's not the Derech HaNashim Lirisken. It's not the regular way where the woman goes to. But if there's anything which is not regular, Psichas HaKever is a regular way, she already becomes Zev V'Sara. Now the Tzemach Tzedek says, but if you read the Shulchan Aruch, we could explain that even according to the Shulchan Aruch, it has to do with Chatzitza and not with Derech HaNashim, not only with Derech Nashim Liris. And why would it be that? Because when you have a Sheferes Ava, because it's big, it will cause Psichas HaKever. And Psichas HaKever is going to cause the blood is going to come out and go also outside the Sheferes and should become Tomei because the blood went outside the Sheferes. So maybe that's why the Shulchan Aruch wrote. Maybe that's why Shulchan Aruch says the Sheferes has to be Sheferes Daka and has nothing to do with Chatzitza. So it's not, that's a doichak pirush. So therefore he goes back and says that's what Alter Rebbe wanted to fit the Shulchan Aruch, the Lashon of Shulchan Aruch, to fit with the Shit of the Rosh, and the Shit of the Rosh would mean that the whole limud of Zev Yadam of Sarah is only mitzat derech hanashim liris, not mitzat chatzitza, and therefore whether it's chatzitza or not is not what makes it or breaks it in this regard. Only difference is whether there's Zev Yadam of Sarah or not. Tzemach Tzedek concludes in this Siman and Kuf Chaf Ches that Taka the Chavas Das Paskins that when a woman sees in the Sheferes Ava, she is Tahir. And the Chavas Das explains to you, it's the first Chavas Das on the Seif, that the Beis Yosef will also be made to it. And the Tzemach Tzedek adds to it, V'chein nira li ikar, that he seems like to hold like the Chavas Das, that's what makes the most sense. She should be Tahir. He says ultimately the mashmos of the Tur and Shulchan Aruch is not so. That's the Tzemach concludes tzarich because the sugya doesn't seem to fit. The sugya makes more sense according to the Chavas Das and not the way the Alter Rebbe explains it in Shulchan Aruch. And the Tzemach himself says it makes more sense to follow the Chavas Das, but ultimately he doesn't want to go against the Shulchan Aruch, doesn't want to go against the Alter Rebbe, so he leaves it in tzarich. That is the easy part of Sif Gimel, which is an introduction to the next part. Introduction connected to the next part. Shulchan Aruch continues, the next part of the Sif. V'chein, similar, imras adam bechaticha, a piece came out. We're soon going to see what exactly this piece, where it came from, what it is, how it looks. And she sees dam, ras adam bechaticha, she saw blood in the Chaticha, even if this Chaticha has cracks, it's not a solid sealed Chaticha, but it has cracks in it, and you see blood in the cracks. And the Shlosh and Shulchan Aruch is be'inyan shnegea b'vsara, and then this piece touches b'sara, she's still tired. Why? She'ein derech liris kein, because that is not the regular way of seeing things. That's case number one. Case number two of the Sif. Case number three. V'chein isha shenekar moker shela, a woman who her rechem got loose, ukemin chaticha isbasar noiflim b'bayis achitzin, and little pieces are finding the place into the bayis achitzin. She's tired. She's also tired. On that you have the Tur. The Tur has this Lashon comes in the Tur, but the Tur right after that brings a story. The story is a story which the Rosh also brings, and the story is Rabbeinu Shimshon, the Rash. It says, the Tur says, Rabbeinu Shimshon did it. What's the Rabbeinu Shimshon did? Ma'aseh be'isha shenekar moker shela, a woman that her moker loosened. Ukemin chaticha is basra yinofel v'vayis achitzin, and little pieces go into the vayis achitzin. V'loi hoisa peisekes liras, and she did not stop seeing. What did she not stop seeing is also machlekes what that means. We'll get to it soon. Kol zman she'es chaticha se vayis achitzin, and there was chatichas left in the vayis achitzin. She v'tir ois l'bayla, and the Rosh was metar her to her husband. Kevon she'ein derech isha liyos royakach. It's not the regular way that a woman sees. And the Beis Yosef right away points out to you over there, Beis Yosef and the Bach disagree on understanding the story of Rabbeinu Shimshon. There's a lot of other disagreements on understanding. Some people don't agree with Rabbeinu Shimshon. And that's, we're going to get to it soon, that's not so much tzedek, but the Beis Yosef comes and says that from the Lashon of the Torah and Rabbeinu Yerucham, it seems to imply when the Lashon is, V'loi hoisa poisekes lirois kol zman she'es chasicha seyu vayis achitzin, it seems like they're implying is that she saw actual blood, regular blood flow. And still, Rabbeinu Shimshon was metar. Why? Because he was toilet, the chatichas, which are still in the Bais Achitza, and those chatichas have blood in it. It's not dam nideh, rather it's blood from the chatichas. And that is the blood which she sees now. But the Beis Yosef tells you right away, from the Rosh, it doesn't seem like that. The Lashon of the Rosh, you could explain that loihoisa poisekes lirois means that she did not stop seeing chatichos falling out. Not that she did not stop seeing blood. She did not stop seeing chatichos. And these chatichos had blood in them. And that's what Rabbeinu Shimshon was metaher. Why? Because ein derech isha lirois kain, it's not the regular way to see blood in chatichos. But if she sees regular blood flow, it's not, it is derech noshim lirois kain. What do we care if it's chatichos or not? He says that Rabbeinu Shimshon would not be matir. And even though in a makkah we would be matir in such a scenario, if a woman has a makkah and the makkah is moitzidam and she sees blood, even if the blood seems like a regular flow, I'm talking about it doesn't look like niddah, it doesn't look like a full flow, but it's flowing, we say that she is mutter under certain conditions. Beis Yosef right away tells you it's only talking about makkah b'tzdodim, not makkah b'moker. If we be makkah b'moker, we metame. And over here, we know the story was that the moker fell and pieces are coming out. So she would be tame in such a scenario. The Bach disagrees in the Beis Yosef and says no. What Rabbeinu Shimshon was matir is that she saw actual blood flow. The chatichas are still inside the Bais Achitza. And she saw blood flow, and that is, and we know that when the chatichas started coming out, she did not have dam niddah then. That means we know there was no dam before then. Rather, the dam started after the chatichas ended there. Therefore, we say that the blood came as a result of the chatichas. Ein derech noshim liras dam that comes as a result of chatichas, comes from the chatichas, and therefore the Rabbeinu Shimshon would be mat. So that's a machlekes Bach and Beis Yosef on understanding the Tur, who brings the story of Rabbeinu Shimshon, which his father, the Rosh, brought. That is the story of chatichas. On that, the Ramah adds, you look in the Ramah adds in the Shulchan Aruch, what does it mean that chaticha is kimin chaticha is bas enough and bas achitzin, she's tahir afilu ra sodam, even if she sees blood? The Ramah understands that kol zman shachaticha is b'bais achitzin. He explains it clearly, like the way the Bach also understood it. Afilu ra sodam kol zman shachaticha is b'bais achitzin shelo tahira. Even if she sees blood, as long as the chatichas are still in the bais achitzin, she's tahir. Why? Because we're told that this blood comes from the chaticha, because we know vaday shenekar mekoiro, we know that the moker got loose. Umachmas makohi, and it is only a result of it's like a mako. And he says kein mashma betur. That's how the Ramah understands the Tur, and the Rabbi Yerucham and the Rosh. So the Ramah understands it, seems to have understood it similar to the way of the Bach. Comes Alter Rebbe on this two sifim of the Alter Rebbe on the beginning of this discussion. One is Sif Tes, one is Sif Yud. Alter Rebbe, if you put the three together, Sifkat and Ches, Tes, and Yud, these three Seifim are the ones where the Alter Rebbe explains the different shittas regarding Sheferes and Chaticha, which from that you see the dinim of what's the definition of Zoiv Yadam V'Fsara, and what's the reason for the machlekes between, what's the difference between Chatzitze, if it's because of Chatzitze or because of Derech HaNashim Lirais. And this is discussed in these sifs. We go through now Sif Tes and Sif Yud, which that is the basis for the Tzemach Tzedek and the Siman Kuf Chav Tes, which is a very long and Yesodistic Tzemach Tzedek, which explains the svaris that are relevant to understanding this sugya. Tzemach Tzedek's tshuva is relevant to this discussion of the rechem falling down. So the Alter Rebbe explains as follows. Starts with Sif Tes. Says the Shulchan Aruch says that if she sees blood b'chaticha, even if the chaticha has cracks and there's blood in the cracks, and the chaticha is touching her skin, her basa, her flesh, she's still tahir because ein derech hanashim liriskein. Alter Rebbe first tells you, and it starts and says, to tell us that it's not, that if the chaticha would be without any cracks in it, and the blood would be only inside the chaticha, but the chaticha would not have any cracks and you not see any blood, it's obvious that she's tired. That's not what the Shulchan Aruch is coming to teach us. Michael says, Zoiv, Yadama, Bifsara. And according to everybody, there's no Zoiv, Dama, Bifsara. The blood is inside the chaticha is sealed, and it's coming out. Rather, what is it teaching us? That the chaticha has cracks, and there is blood inside the cracks, and this blood is the blood that's touching her besada. Still in all, she's tired. And Alter Rebbe again repeats, this has nothing to do with chatzitza. Rather, it is because ein derech hanashim liris kein. Ein derech hanashim liris dam b'chaticha. And Alter Rebbe right away clarifies to you, shouldn't get any misunderstandings. Obviously, he's talking about that the blood was in the chaticha and not that a period started together with the chatichas. Because if the blood would start as a period and chatichas also come out, it's two separate things that we can't say, it's obviously stomach. Obviously, what we're talking about over here is that there was no period, there was no blood before. All it was chatichas. And the chatichas are the ones that brought the blood out of the makar. And because the chatichas were the ones that drew the blood out of the makar, it's ein derech hanashim liris ken. Derech hanashim liris is that the blood flows out of the makar, not that the chaticha drags the blood out of the makar. So again, to understand the way the Alter Rebbe continues in his kav, derech hanashim liris is blood leaves the makar, not gets dragged out of the makar. Therefore, by chaticha, which has cracks in it, the chaticha is what dragged the blood out with it. The sheferes is what dragged the blood out with it. That's why it's fine. So and then he continues and says, what is it that the Shulchan Aruch says that the dam was in these cracks? He says it's to teach you that the dam is only in the cracks, in these cracks in this piece, in this chaticha. Because if there would be even a slight amount of blood on top of the chaticha, not inside one of the cracks in the chaticha, she's tummy. Why? Because maybe, who tells you that the blood which is on top of the chaticha was not kederech hanashim liris? Maybe that blood did come kederech hanashim liris and it landed on top of the chaticha and then it came out. Farkert, he says, ibchum estabri, what's say farkert? The blood came naturally. The chaticha came, and when the body started releasing blood for the period, it also took out with it the chatichas. And that's why you see the blood on top of the chatichas. The only way you could say it's not so is if the blood is inside the chatichas, even if it's a crack, so you see the blood, it's still, in the cracks, it's still fine. Then is when we say that the dam was nekar from the rechem and went into the chatichas. That's where it stayed. And when the body released the chatichas, the blood that was inside the chatichas never came out in derech hanoshim liris, and therefore that blood is considered tar. The same thing applies in shuferes. Why? He says raglayim ledavar, that if you put the shuferes ad hamakir, so the shuferes is what drew the blood out, and not that the blood left punkt in this moment that you put the shuferes in, a period started. That's not what we say. Rather, we say the shuferes, because you put it in all the way to the rechem, that's what drew the blood out. Same thing by chatichas. If the chaticha comes out and there's only blood on the bekim, on the cracks in the chaticha, it's that the blood was in the chaticha, and that's what dragged it out to bring it out. Next point, the Alter Rebbe says, and you also don't have to be worried. Yeah, because the next question would be, fine, it didn't come from the rechem. Fine. The rechem didn't release the blood. The blood came from the rechem sometime before. It was hanging out in the Bais HaChitzon. Bais HaChitzon, we know that the Roiv Damim come from the Makir. So maybe it was in the Bais HaChitzon before. And the Chaticha or the Shveferes picked up that blood and dragged it out. The Shveferes, he says, and therefore it would be a problem. He says, no, by Shveferes is not a problem. Why? Because the fact is the Shveferes blocks out the Bais HaChitzon. The Shveferes goes up, it blocks out. It's a chatzitza to the Bais HaChitzon. So the chatzitza is not the reason why she's tired, because ain't derech hanoshim liris, but it obviously means that any blood she's going to see is only in the Shveferes, didn't come from the outside, it didn't jump over the Shveferes into the Shveferes. Rather, if there was blood on the outside, it would be on the outside. Blood on the inside of the Shveferes came from the fact that it drew it out of the rechem. And the same thing, if you see a chaticha with bekim and there's only blood inside the cracks, you can't say, oh, it was in the Bais HaChitzon and the blood went in. Because if it would be in the Bais HaChitzon, the blood would go into this chaticha, it doesn't make sense that it would only go into the cracks, and the whole chaticha would not have any blood outside of it, only inside the cracks. Obviously, if it was only inside these cracks and the chaticha, it's obvious that it came from the rechem and not from the Bais HaChitzon. Up until here, the Alter Rebbe says this is all according to the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, right? Because that's what up until now, until this is the middle of Sifkot and Tes. Up until now, we only explain the shit of the Rosh. And the Alter Rebbe explains the Torah and Shulchan Aruch paskin like the Rosh, and how the Alter Rebbe understood the Rosh. And according to them, this is what the din would be. However, Tosfos and the Rambam have a different shit. Tosfos and the Rambam, they hold that the blood that's inside the cracks of the chaticha is tummy. Why? Because ultimately, this blood that's in the bekim, in the cracks, is negeh b'fsara. Is touching her flesh, and therefore you have the issue of zoiv yadam b'fsara. And when is there no zoiv yadam b'fsara? When there's a chatzitza. But here there's no chatzitza. The blood is inside the bekim, and the bekim are touching the bekim with the blood are touching the flesh. So obviously there's no chatzitza between the blood and the flesh. There's no chatzitza between the blood and the flesh. The ikar of the svara is mitam chatzitza. That is what zev. That's the limit from zev yidam v'vsara. That when there is a chatzitza, that is what ein derech hanoshim liros. Therefore, she is tummy. And therefore, according to the Rambam and Tosfos, if there is blood in the bekim, in the chaticha, and then that goes through the Bais HaChitzon, so obviously the blood that's in the bekim touched the Bais HaChitzon without a chatzitza, and therefore she is tummy. And then the Alter Rebbe adds based on this in the parentheses, because the Alter Rebbe explains just the shittas. In the parentheses he adds his what the Alter Rebbe the svaras. So he says, the Alter Rebbe adds over there. So if so, if a woman, according to the Rambam and Tosfos, which we did not discuss in the din of Shepheres, we only brought it into discussion now. Alter Rebbe says in this scenario, according to the Rambam and Tosfos, if a woman would put in a Shepheres only up until the end of the Bais HaChitzin, just make a chatzitza around the Bais HaChitzin, which is what the Rambam and the Tosfos hold. That is where the chatzitza is, and if there's a chatzitza there, then there is no more issue. Then it's already no longer zevidam v'fsara, and it's ein derech hanashim liriskein. So therefore, if you put a sheferes in all the way there, and blood from the mocker flowed to the bais hapnimi and into sheferes without touching the bais hachitz at any point in time, even if it's b'shas vesta, she would still be tahor. Why? Because it's not touching the bais hachitz at all. According to Rambam and Tosfos, that's what would seem. Yeah, that is the parentheses. Alter Rebbe just points that out according to the Rambam and the Tosfos. And Alter Rebbe concludes, the Shach writes in the name of the Bach that Tzarich Iyun, if you could be maker like the Shulchan Aruch when it comes to the Bekim in the Chaticha. But the Alter Rebbe concludes in Minchas Yaakov, and so writes it, and the Taz both write, Shein lozuz mipsak Shulchan Aruch, you don't move yourself one ayora from what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Shulchan Aruch over here in this scenario is mekel, and that is what we're mekel. The same kula, and that means we follow the shitta according to the shitta of the Rosh. That is for that specific for this if in-laws was Mipsak Shulchan Aruch. You have the Shit of the Rambam, which here is Machmir. We don't have to be Machmir like the Shit of the Rambam. Same Shit of the Rambam really is also Mekel, because when it comes to Sheferes, you flip it around, the Rambam is much more Mekel. You could be much more Mekel according to the Rambam, the understanding of the Alter Rebbe in the Rambam. Continues the Alter Rebbe that on the next Sifkat and Yud, this is where he continues this discussion. This is on what the Ramah writes. The Ramah writes that if Rasa, Afilu Rasa Dam, as long as the Chaticha is in the Bais HaChitz, and she's tired. Why is that? So the Alter Rebbe explains as follows. There's no reason. It's not an Ishkin Chiddush to tell you that if she sees on. If she did a bdikas aid, a bdika, and on the bdika she saw chatichos, and the dam is absorbed in the chatichos, she's tired. Right? Why? Because even if you would see the actual chatichos, dam which is in the chatichos is also is even if it wouldn't be from the makkah, she would still be tired, according to the Shulchan Aruch. Why? Because ein derech hanashim lirois b'chaticha. But the chiddush is that even if she saw only on the bdika, and the chatichos are still inside the bais hachitzin, all she saw was blood that she saw on the bdika, she's still tired. This is like the understanding of the Bach. Because we're toilet that this dam that she sees right now in the bdika was dam that was absorbed in the bekim of the chaticha, and it came out now, and that's why this blood is tired. Now, Alter Rebbe continues, we're not choishesh, like we said before, that the blood came from the malkir, and it stayed in the bais hachitzin, and from there it went onto the aid, onto the bdika, and it's not that it came from the chatichas which are also in the bais hachitzin. Why? Because a woman has a cheskas tahara. If a woman has a cheskas tahara, hamid oisal cheskasa, leave her in her cheskas tahara, and we're not metame misofik. And we're similar to a makkah. And there is no bigger makkah than this. You have a chatichas rechem, a piece of a rechem gets loose, or the whole rechem gets loose, a piece of the rechem gets loose, falls into the bais hachitzin. The mocker itself is moli bedam nida, always. The mocker itself has dam nida. Still in all, the dam which is absorbed in this chaticha, which came from the mocker, is tired. Why? Because at the time when the chaticha left the mocker, the blood was already absorbed in it, and that blood is tired because it never left the mocker in its natural form. So now, how do you know that this blood take did not come from the mocker? You have no way of knowing. You have no way of knowing. Maybe she had a period before. So that's what Alter Rebbe clarifies, that if this only applies if only if at the time of the nefila, when the piece fell, she did a bdika and she didn't see any blood on the aid. So she knows that no blood was coming from the mocker. Only chatichas are coming from the mocker. And afterwards, after the chatichas came, then she started seeing blood, and she didn't stop seeing blood as long as the chatichas were inside in the bayis hachitzain. And therefore we say that the blood that she sees now is coming from the chatichas. If this blood would be coming from the mocker, she should have had to seen it earlier. She shouldn't have had to seen it earlier when she did the first bdika. But if she did a bdika she did not do a bdika when the first time when the nefilas hamoker when the rechem started falling down, you can't say that the blood that she sees now, she didn't do a bdika, so you don't know. So you can't say with certainty that the blood that she sees now is coming from the bekim and the chaticha and not from the mocker. Because she has no way to determine. If she would have before a bdika, she would be able to determine that any blood coming after is coming only from the chaticha. But since she did not do a bdika before, so we have no way to determine it. If we have no way to determine it, she remains as she remains tummy.
If she did a bdika that had blood on it, you also can't be sure that it's natural. It could be.
You can never be sure of anything, but
But if you find blood, then you just have to assume that.
Yeah.
Even though it happened right after the rechem fell.
If it happened right after the rechem fell, if she did a bdika then and she saw, you don't know. Yeah. Because then what you could say is either the blood, if she did not do a bdika before, or the did a bdika didn't come out clean, so we could say either the blood she sees now, maybe the blood came before, or maybe the blood came together with it. But it's definitely dam tame. It's not blood that did not come out of the rechem. It's blood, the only blood which is tahir is blood which was absorbed into the chaticha before the chaticha left the rechem.
Why do you have to do a bdika? Why? By a makkah, you don't have to do a bdika right before you did a makkah, right after. See, the whole part is that
when she felt in the nefila, she did a bdika and she knew that she didn't see any blood. Only blood said.
If we didn't do a bdika, then we have to be choshesh that maybe there was also natural blood besides the blood from the makkah.
Because you see blood and you know the blood is coming from the mocker.
Well, we know it's from the makkah.
We don't know it's from the makkah.
Just like by a makkah, if you have a makkah, it could be a makkah bleeding for a long time, but we won't say that at some point, maybe there's natural blood coming down as well.
If it's b'shas vesta, maybe, yeah.
B'shas vesta,
Yeah, and that is the shitta of the Bach. The Alter Rebbe concludes this is the shitta of the Bach, that if she did not do a bdika, whether it's a chatichas basar, stam a chaticha which came out, or it's a chaticha from the mocker, a piece of the mocker that fell, she would be tamei if she did not do the bdika before. And that is the way the Bach understands it, and the Shach understands it, but this is only according to the Shulchan Aruch, because the Rama himself in Darkei Moshe, and the Alter Rebbe points out that it seems like the Taz also holds that way, is that even if there was, it goes back to the that even if there is no, even blood that was not absorbed into the bekim of the chaticha, at the moment that the piece, at the moment b'shas akira, at the moment when the piece came out of the rechem, and or even if it just left the mocker at the same time, together with the chaticha, and the chatichas were the ones that brought the blood out. Not that it got absorbed into the chaticha and then the chaticha brought it out, but the chaticha was the one that dragged the blood out with it, the blood that was in the rechem, she's still tired. Why? Because ein derech hanoshim lirisken. There's no derech hanoshim, is not that they see a period that gets dragged out because of pieces. According to the Bach and to the Shach, up until now, if she sees the blood with the chatichas, she is only if the blood was absorbed into the chatichas before the akira. But over here, when the blood was not absorbed into the chatichas before the akira, according to the Shach, will be a problem. According to the Taz, it would not be. Mashmos the Taz would not be a problem. Why? Because the fact is that even if the chaticha was the one that dragged the blood out, that chaticha, that blood is still considered that it came out by the Chaticha, and that's ein derech hanoshim liris kain. And the Torah only made tamei dam that comes from the mocker if it came that the rechem released blood and then it came out, and not that the mocker or a piece of the mocker took the blood out with it. Yeah, the blood has to come out, not that the mocker took the blood out, not that the piece of the mocker took it out with it. But all this is obviously based according to the understanding of the Rosh. What means the dam yezev v'sara. But back to Rambam and Tosfos. According to the Shit of Rambam and Tosfos, this whole discussion is about blood which is outside the chatichas. According to Rambam and Tosfos, even blood that's in the bekim of the chatichas, in the cracks, that's also tamei. So according to them, the Alter Rebbe says that according to Rambam and Tosfos, you have a kul over here. The blood that the piece of the mocker dragged out with it would be tahir. Because by regular chaticha, not when the mocker falls, when you have a regular chaticha, the dam traveled from the mocker into the bais hachitz in its natural way. It left the mocker, it went to the bais hachitz. There was a chaticha that came along with it, something else, but there was no chatzitza. And does it make a difference whether the chatzitza was the one that brought the blood whether the chaticha was the one that brought the blood into the bais hachitz or it's flowed naturally? It makes no difference. That is derech hanoshim liris, and derech hanoshim liris is that blood flows through the flesh without a chatzitza, on the flesh without a chatzitza. But that isn't the case when it's a chaticha me'alma, regular dam, even dam inside the bekim. But if you have the actual piece of a mocker which fell, not a chatichas basar which came, but just a piece of the mocker fell, and that piece of the mocker has still in it the blood of the mocker, it's for sure not derech riyah, even according to the Rambam and the Taz. Because derech riyah is that it leaves the mocker. Over here, that never left the mocker. It came with the mocker itself. The whole mocker came. A piece of a mocker fell out. So according to the Rambam, it will still not be derech riyah, even if there is no chatzitza. And she's tahira in such a scenario even more than the Shuferes. And according to the Rambam, this would be even b'shas vesta. Why? Because there is, according to the Rambam, ein derech hanoshim lirois through a chatzitza. And but over here, there was never a leaving of the blood, never left the mocker. So therefore, when the piece came out when the piece of the mocker, not a chaticha ma'alma, the chaticha of the mocker came out, that chaticha that brings the blood with it, the blood never actually left the mocker in its natural form. Therefore, there was no re'iyah that is asur min ha-Torah according to the Rambam. It's not derech noshim lirois. And the change that it's not derech noshim is much greater than chatzitza. Very important point over here. The Alter Rebbe understands over here that according to the Shit of the Rambam and Tosfos, this is going to be much clearer understood in the Tzemach Tzedek, which I don't think we're going to have time to do today. That the dam, when the dam leaves the body, when the din of dam yeh zoiv v'vsara, that is a chatzitza. The chatzitza is what brings about is the proof for not being for it not being derech hanoshim liros. Derech hanoshim liros means that the blood comes out in a natural way. When there is a change from the natural way, then it's in derech hanoshim liros. What's a change from the natural way is a chatzitza. But when you have a much bigger change in a chatzitza, like the actual mocker releasing, falling from one place to another, that is much bigger. And even according to Rambam and Tosfos, it would be considered tahir. Concludes Alter Rebbe based on this. When a woman has this choili ha-paarpael, which is that the whole mocker gets loose and falls down, doesn't fall out, it falls down. And it means that it's not, the muscles are not as tight as they were before and they can't hold the rechem in place. So the Alter Rebbe says, as long as the rechem did not go back to its location, any blood that she sees, you have to be metayr, so long as there was no hargasha. And we don't say, ein psichas hakever v'lo dam, because there is no psichas hakever. The kever itself came. There's no psichas hakever. The kever didn't open up. The kever fell. The whole rechem fell. And the only time you have to be machmer is b'shas vesta. And that's what he also says in short in Sifkat and Yud Aleph, that in the shas vesta we're not toile dam and a chaticha, even though it's a makkah. The only time you could be, and even when it's a makkah, when there will be a shas vesta, we're toile in the vesas and not in the makkah. Now, this Tzemach Tzedek that was planning,
How far down does the rechem have to come? How far down does the rechem have to come for it to go into the together?
There's not that much space to move over there. It's not such a big place.
That the whole rechem is outside.
The rechem fell. It's just a natural thing. It's not outside. It moved down in the body. It's not held in place where it's supposed to be. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek is in Siman Kuf Chavtes. It goes through all the shittas that are relevant to understanding this din of this gather of this idea of the Pharfal. He brings the shittas of the Rishonim, the Rashi, Tosfos, Rosh, Rash, Ramban, all of them, and discusses the Alter Rebbe. It doesn't seem like I'll have enough time to do it today, so I guess we will be mamshech tomorrow. We will do the Tzemach Tzedek's Kuf Chavtes Kuf Lamed on this topic. Just want to finish with one more small thing from the Alter Rebbe. To this we'll get back at a different time. Just to point out that this whole thing that we say that she sees chatichas ktanas, we are matir, even if there's blood inside the bekim, it's only if the Beis Yosef says that the Rash was only matir, the Rabbeinu Shimshon was only matir, if shehit lachatichas b'mayim poishim v'lo nimoichu. You put these little pieces into lukewarm water and they didn't dissolve. Why? Because the Beis Yosef says, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch writes there, the Beis Yosef says that if you put it in and it dissolves, so obviously it's just blood which coagulated and became hard and nothing to do with, it's not a chaticha, it's just mamish blood which changed from its natural form. The Ramah disagrees with him in Darkei Moshe, not here. The Ramah disagrees with him, and he says that you do not need to do this bdik of putting these little pieces inside lukewarm water, because once you know that the mocker got released, you don't have to worry about it. And that's the Alter Rebbe says that so it seems from the Maisa of the Rabbeinu Shimshon that the Rosh brings, it actually seems that in the story it doesn't say that he required to take out the piece to put the pieces into the lukewarm water and dissolve them. It just says that he was matayr her. So that's why obviously when talking about this scenario, it would not be when it's a mocker chatichas mocker shenekra, we would not need to do this bdika. But if it's stam chatichas me'alma, not chatichas from the mocker, in such a scenario, if you don't know that the mocker was nekar, then even according to Ramah Darkei Moshe, in Darkei Moshe, you would still have to do this test to determine if it's blood, if it's hardened blood, or it's chatichas by itself. We'll continue tomorrow.